Hi. I'll take around 15 minutes. Um, would speak and show a bit. When I speak, there'll be nothing to see. When there's something to see, I won't speak. Uh, there'll be stories, 5, 6 of them, all relevant. I'll arrive at what it tries to say in a bit. 3 things we'd be talking about in next 15 minutes. First would be creativity in CTV. It's a mobile conference, but we're talking about a little bit of a CTV. Audience behavior more or less remains the same, so that's what we'll do. The second thing that we'll talk about is contextual in YouTube advertising. And third is how our rich media creatives are highly effective when we are running a campaign across internet. So we'll start with a story. There was a young man crossing a farmer and asked him how long, he was telling his farm, how long will it take to reach the next village? The farmer looked up, didn't say anything, and started telling again. Young man found it strange and kept walking. When he had walked 20 paces, the farmer shouted from behind, "It'll take you 15 minutes. Young man turned around, said thank you, and then asked that, "Why didn't you tell me when I asked you earlier?" Said, "I didn't know how fast you walk." This is the information that the farmer needed to arrive at the solution. And that's what we need to do when we are talking about advertising, creativity in CTV. What do consumers typically do? The study suggests that they go through the 3 steps. The first step is they wait to skip the ad, or they see the time when the ad will get over. That's the stage 1. The second stage is they actually watch the ad. The third stage is when they pick up another device. That's the journey that they go through. The one requirement that marketeers tend to meet with this activity is that they get the attention. Remember the second step, they actually watch the ad. So you've got the attention, but the important journey is from attention to awareness, because only then the action is going to happen. All individuals go through the journey of attention to awareness to action. Thus, from attention to awareness is an important journey. Here's another study that I would like to quote, which greatly emphasizes the importance of attention to awareness. There was a study done in US to find out most highly effective salesperson. After a lot of intense struggle, they found a person who used to sell shoes in a shoe shop would sell it to every customer that he attended to. They went to see the behavior of the shoe seller, about how he goes about selling. When the customer arrived and asked the shoe seller to see a pair of shoes, he showed them a pair of shoes. When the customer asked to see another pair, he showed them another pair. When the customer asked him to show the third pair, here is what the shoe salesman did that made him the most effective. He told the customer, which one out of the 2 should I remove? What he did is that he held the attention so that the awareness happens and so that the action takes place and the person ends up buying these shoes. And that's the journey that's most important when it comes to advertising on connected television, where the journey from attention to awareness happens only if the user sees 3 things. 1, is it personalized? Second, is there a call to action? First, is it personalized? Second, is there a call to action? And third is, I forget and I thus refer to my notes. There is an irresistible offer. If these 3 conditions are met, only then the user moves from attention to awareness. I'd repeat, if it is personalized, if there is a call to action, and if there is a and if there is an irresistible offer. This happens only and only if the video ad is married with the creative. Stand-alone video ads get the attention, but to meet the three criteria that the consumer has from the advertising meets only and only if very engaging creatives are built in with the video ad, and I'll show you some examples of that. That's the one aspect. The second aspect that I'd like to highlight about the creatives that go with the video, two-dimensional creatives work exceedingly well if these three criteria are there, but there is a one kind of creative that does even a better job, and that's a three-dimensional creative. What I'm trying to say that if there is a video ad along with the 3D creatives, it works highly well because we have a sense when we are talking about depth that the object actually is real. The sense of depth in an individual starts when they are from around 6 months old. Once they start growing up, they start associating the three dimensions with object. And when somebody sees a three-dimensional image on the screen, their subconscious minds tend to tell them that it still is an object before their conscious mind takes over and says that that's an image. What happens is that no matter how good a two-dimensional creative is, it's still considered an image. But when a three-dimensional image, whether it is not that great, is shown, for the first few seconds, the user always thinks it's an object and hence try to have an interaction with it because of the subconscious mind telling them that there is something for them to see, touch, which their conscious mind comes up in the 5th or 6th second and tells them that's still the image. Thus, when we get all these three things together, the three aspects, we do the journey from attention to awareness to action, and the creativity in CTV plays extremely high role. That is what we do at Mediakart, and the few examples that you'll see right now would emphasize that more. There is 1 minute 40 seconds for which you need to see the screen. It'll cover everything that I've spoken about till now. If you can just play the video. Topic is that it's very scientific. What we also do pre and post campaigns is that we do a study to see what is being paid attention to, and this is a depiction of heat map that we utilize to see where all the user is focusing on when their eyes are on the screen. Whatever is prominently seen is where we put more focus on. That's how typically we go about to make sure that it's visually very appealing and the focus points are at the right places for user to focus on an advertiser to get the result. The next aspect that I'd be talking about is the contextual, and this is in context of the YouTube ads that you see, and more importantly, contextual in terms of visual context. When we say contextual, we typically understand keywords. More than keywords, what's important is the visual context. More important or equally important is the visual context. Again, quoting a study, this was done in France, where a boy was asked to go to a mall and ask women for their number so that he could call them for a date. So this good-looking boy enters a mall, stands in front of a bakery, and the women were passing by. He stopped them, requested them for their numbers, and told them that he'd like to call them for a date. His success percentage was around 10 to 12. 1 out of 10 women shared their number for him to later on call. The next shop in front of which he stood was a shoe shop, and his percentage almost remained the same. It was around 8 to 10% success is what he got in getting the numbers. It's the third shop where the numbers jumped up by 2.5 times. 1 out of every 4 women shared their number to him so that he could call them for a date, and that was a flower shop. The mall was the same, the boy was the same, there was similar audience, just a background changed the entire result. And that is the power of visual context. What happens with this kind of contextual targeting is where we identify the faces, the images, the objects, the activities, the logos, and then accordingly run the ad so that the results are 2.5x better, as happened in the case that we were just talking about. What also it does is that, given the fact that we have so much data, the abundance of data that we have got helps us arrive at reaching the audience at exactly the right time, with contextual targeting tends to do. The contextual targeting always depicts the state of mind, and thus it is highly effective. That's why we always talk about being contextually relevant whenever we are doing any advertising activity at Mediakart, and a few examples that you'll see in next 50 seconds that we'll play on the screen. The last section, Mediakart is known for doing contextual and creative together for any activity that we undertake. We spoke about CTV ads, we spoke about YouTube ads, the whole lot of things that we do on mobile. This is about all mobile marketing on mobile ads. Everything that we do at Mediakart is contextually relevant and high on creatives. You'll see some examples there. But I always tell a story to relate to what Mediakart does. And this is a story of a husband and a wife and a friend where the husband thought that wife had developed a little bit of a problem in hearing. It's very sensitive. So he consulted his friend, who was also a doctor. The friend suggested that first we need to find out the extent of the problem. For that, you need to speak with your wife from a distance, keep moving closer, and then we'll exactly get to know how big the problem is. That very evening, the husband spoke to his wife from 50 feet, asking what's in for dinner. He didn't get any answer, moved to 40 feet, asked the same question, 30, 20, 10, and then went as close to her as possible and asked what's in for dinner. The wife turned around and said, "This is the 5th time I'm telling you it's fish and rice." If the husband is the advertiser, if wife is the audience, then Mediakart is that doctor friend who gets you the right solution with by marrying contextual and creativity to arrive at the best solution possible. Some of the solutions you'll see on the screen, and we're done with that.